and Dr. Ken Mazzourinis, Professor of Economics at John Abbott College and McGill University, and past president of AHEPA Canada. Both these gentlemen are very well known in Quebec, Canada, Greece, and abroad. Both in their own ways, from their own platforms, have served Hellenism with passion for decades. Let us all enjoy their passion as they enlighten us today with their knowledge on the subject matters around Greece's past, present, and future. Enjoy the lectures and long live our beloved independent Greece. Zito η ελεύθερη Ελλάδας μας. Ευχαριστώ.
Thank you, Dr. Halatsis. Our first speaker, Leo Kousakis, Senator. Senator Leo was appointed to the Senate by Prime Minister Stephen Harper in 2008, and in 2015 was named Speaker of the Senate by Prime Minister Harper. Senator Kousakis was not only the first Canadian of Hellenic descent to be named Speaker, but also the first non-Anglophone or Francophone to serve in the role. Senator Kousakis has been a member of the chair of several Senate committees, including Foreign Affairs and International Trade. He currently has served several motions on the Senate floor, including one challenging on the government of Canada to condemn Turkey's unilateral decision to convert the Hagia Sophia into a mosque, and another calling for the Senate to study Turkey's increased aggression in the Asian and Mediterranean seas. Outside the Senate, Senator Kousakis continues to spearhead efforts to raise funds and awareness for the Greek schools of Socrates and Demosthenes of Greater Montreal, and for Giant Steps School and Resources Center, which provides education and services for the autistic children and their families. He has served 2 terms as Vice President of the Hellenic Congress of Quebec and was a founding member of the Hellenic Board of Trade of Greater Montreal. In 2018, he was invested as an archon of the Greek Orthodox Church in recognition of his unwavering support of the Church, his leadership within the Hellenic community, and his work on behalf of all Canadians as a parliamentarian. Senator Kousakis' greatest sources of pride and joy remain his wife, Demi, and their 2 sons, Peter and Tasso. With pleasure, I now present to you Senator Kousakis. Senator, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Angie, very much, and thank you to Dr. Halatsis, the President of the Canadian Hellenic Congress. First of all, Theo, I will certainly not try to lecture members of the Greek community. We know that lecturing fellow Greeks could be a very, very dangerous endeavor. So what I will try to do is actually share my thoughts on some very important topics, and hopefully it can stimulate some discourse and discussion amongst everyone. Again, I want to thank the Canadian Hellenic Congress, each and every member of the board and the executive, but particularly I want to thank all of you who are on this call today, which all of us are, at the end of the day, Hellenic activists. I've had many honors in my life and the privilege of being summoned to the upper chamber and serving as a Canadian parliamentarian in the upper chamber. And I can tell you, I take my responsibility representing my wonderful province of Quebec and our country with a great deal of honor in that capacity. But there's no greater burden and responsibility and understanding of we Hellenes in whatever walks of life we excel in. We have that added privilege of carrying that flame, carrying that flag of Hellenism, which I think comes a lot of privilege, but a great deal of responsibility. I do want to say this, that my engagement, as you all know, many of you know, in the community started at a very young age, be it the Hellenic community of Montreal, the community of Laval. I was vice president of the Hellenic Congress of Quebec and an active participant in many occasions with the Canadian Hellenic Congress as well. And I did this because, like all of you, I have a sense of civil responsibility. We Hellenes understand that Hellenism in the diaspora is one that comes with that responsibility. And we face challenges, and I'd like to talk about the challenges that our community across this country and around the world as Helene faces, some of the opportunities as well. And I will wrap it up, of course, in highlighting some of the geopolitical challenges that Greece is undertaking right now and facing in the Balkans, which we're well aware of. For thousands of years, of course, Hellenism has endured, and it has endured and prospered on the principle of education, which we Hellenes around the world value. All of us know, being children of Greek immigrants to this country, the number one discussion around the table is πήγαινε σχολείο, μορφώσου, πάρε ένα χαρτί, να είσαι ο καλύτερος που μπορείς να είσαι. These are all fundamental pillars upon which Hellenism exists today. And of course, we stand on the shoulders of giants, because Hellenism is not relegated to any one geographic nation. Hellenism is not relegated to any one group of citizens on this earth. Hellenism is a spirit, and it's based on education, and it's based on excelling in sciences and mathematics and arts and culture and philosophy. That's what Hellenism is all about. And doesn't matter what corner of this earth you are, Hellenism is exercised in one way or another in academia, in the professional world, like I said, in science as well. Hellenes have excelled, and of course we continue to around the world. We find Hellenes in the sphere of politics, in the sphere of science. We have renowned Americans of Hellenic origin who are discovering vaccines for the existential threat that we're facing in the world right now of Corona and COVID-19. We have Greeks and Hellenes excelling in broadcasting, in the news industry, in the construction industry, as engineers. You name the field, you will find Hellenism prospering in 2020 as much as it did 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. And we, of course, excel on the enduring principles of course, philanthropia, philotimo, philoxenia. These are some of the principles that we all understand as part of Hellenism. Our civil responsibility to our society is what drives us to get involved with organizations as the Hellenic Congress and all the various groups that we participate in. And of course, one area we have excelled in 2020, Hellenic communities across Canada have been masterful and great contributors to philanthropia, to charity. We support our local hospitals. We support our local philoptochos. I think we do a very good job. Of course, we can always do more in times of need, but I've had the privilege as a senator to travel coast to coast, not just in my hometown of Montreal, where we have a vibrant community, but I've been to places like Regina and small communities like in Ottawa and communities in places like Alberta and Edmonton, where you see the Hellenes wearing their heart on their sleeve and contributing to their local causes and being great contributors to Canadian society. Because again, Hellenism, as we know, is not just, again, identified by someone of Greek origin, of Greek Orthodox faith. Hellenism is that spirit. It warmed my heart last year before COVID to go to the annual night of Greek night in Regina, where there was 1,500 participants at a fundraiser for a local hospital in Regina. And out of the 1,600 participants, as you can appreciate in Regina, were not numerous. The vast majority were of non-Greek descent, but they were there to honor Hellenism. And of course, we honor Hellenism on a day-to-day basis when we participate in our civil responsibility and we give back to our society. I believe that going forward, the important elements of Hellenism that we can build on is the whole principle of democracy, the whole principle of civil responsibility. And of course, democracy, as we all know, is one of the great contributions that Hellenism has made to the world. And even though democracy today is fragile, and probably sadly to say in 2020 it's fragile, probably in large part because of the ever-growing disruption in society and the challenges we face, both in terms of existential challenges of pandemic crisis, economic crisis, social unrest as we in the Western world are starting to deal with our diversity. Democracy is probably under fire and challenged more than ever before. And again, we Hellenes, I think what can be a a magnet to bring us together, a springboard to engage in the discourse that's going on right now in Canada and in many regions of the world. Democracy is something we understand. It's so rooted and based in being Hellenic. Demo, the word demo comes from the word, of course, common people. And kratia, of course, is from the Greek word of strength and rule. And that's what democracy is all about. And without that, without basic freedom, we can't flourish as Hellenes in any of the fields of science and art and culture. We've seen some of the greatest accomplishments in all those areas throughout the history of mankind were always rooted on the basis of having a strong democratic society. We look at the challenges we face right now in our community across Canada, and it's rooted on the debate between diversity and unity. Of course, in Canada, we're a multicultural society, and that debate goes on a regular basis. We have some politicians in this country that say that diversity is the root of the strength of our country. I believe as a Canadian politician that unity is the strength of our nation. Just like I will transcend that debate, of course, to our community challenges that we face right now in Canada and what the Hellenic community and the Hellenic movement has faced these challenges going back thousands of years in our history. We are a people that are very regionalistic. I'm very proud of my heritage as a Lakona, as a Spartiati, as a Maniati. And of course, we all know, and even amongst us, when we congregate, what do we say? You know, where are your parents from? Where are you from? It's part and parcel of being Greek. But as we know, the moments of the greatest success of Hellenism have come when we've managed to unite all our forces and come together in a common call and a common destiny. My message right now is when we look as a young Hellene here in Canada, growing up in the bosom of our community in Montreal, we face the challenges which is part and parcel of human nature and our Hellenism. We have internal competition, and of course, that's a good thing. Through competition comes strength. But a call I make today to the Canadian Hellenic Congress, but to all Hellenic organizations across the country, diversity is our strength, but success only comes when we're able to unite. And of course, that's an ongoing challenge, and sometimes it's elusive for a variety of reasons. Human nature is not always easy to work together. But I look at the first wave of immigrants that came to this country, my parents' generation, with a nickel in their pocket and a dream for a better hope and a better tomorrow, and a better hope and dream for their children. And they built churches, and they built community centers, and they build these institutions like the Hellenic Canadian Congress, the provincial congresses across the country, our Philoptochos, and so on and so forth. I'm also very proud to have made a small contribution to all of these organizations, very proud to have been one of the founders of the Hellenic Board of Trade of Montreal, and I try to inspire future generation of Hellenes to, number one, honor our current organizations, build future organizations, and all of us not be afraid to get into a dialogue of how our society evolves, because we're evolving in Canada. I am very privileged that every year, this year being the exception again because of the challenges of COVID, of hosting the graduating class of Socrati Demostheni at the Senate of Canada. And I'll tell you, I'll share an experience I had a few years back. I was waiting at the door of the Senate at a particular time for the kids to arrive. And through the door come rushing in 3 children. One of them was Asian looking. The other one was African Canadian looking. The third one, you can tell, was not your typical Greek traditional looking kid, and all 3 of them run in, and they were excited to see me, and they said, "Κύριε Χουσάκο, σας ευχαριστώ που μας καλέσατε εδώ πέρα να δούμε τη Γερουσία και να δούμε τη Βουλή του Καναδά," in wonderful, fantastic Greek that I was so proud of, and I can only aspire to be as fluent in the Greek language as they are. And I said to myself at first, wait a minute, what's going on? And then when that class came in, I realized that that is the new Hellenic community of Canada. That is where our future is. People that are coming genetically from Greek background, from African Canadian background, from Asian background. The mixed marriages, of course, of the children of that first generation that came here now is over 75%. And again, We have to go back and be proud of the fact that I always say to people, the whole debate about diversity didn't start with the Black Lives Matter movement in the world. It didn't start when Justin Trudeau woke up and started using the rhetoric. The whole notion, believe it or not, of cultural diversity is a Hellenic invention. Alexander the Great, one of the greatest leaders of the Hellenistic movement, himself always said that Hellenism is not about a color of your skin or a region of the world you're from. It's about embracing Hellenism, the education, the philosophy, the way of life. And I think that's the strength that we have as a community going forward. At all occasions, whenever I rise in the Senate, on parliamentary committees, on trips, I always draw parallels. As a proud Canadian, and everyone who knows me knows that I'm un fier Québécois, a proud Quebecer, and fier Canadien, and I always defend the interests of the country that I was born in. The country in my heart is always Canadian, but my cerveau, as they say, and my bloodlines, they're always Hellenistic. You can't change them. And there's no dichotomy between being a great Canadian and a great Hellene. Because again, the principles of civil responsibility, a philanthropia, a philotimo, these are values that if we share to the Canadian, in the Canadian fabric of our politics, of our society, there's no greater contribution that we can make to this country as children of immigrants and as immigrants. So I want to highlight that point that I said earlier, that we have to evolve. We have to, and I think the Canadian Hellenic Congress, being a national umbrella representing all organizations, has to take that leadership role in terms of the structure. I also want to highlight and congratulate the Canadian Hellenic Congress, because ultimately, Mr. Halatsis and company, differences and our diversities and our conflicts will always exist. But putting those aside, I can say as a parliamentarian, and I've witnessed this firsthand, when it came to the agenda of defending the interest of the Hellenic community, and it was time to step up and do the work, you left the divergences aside, the conflicts aside, and you've pedaled forward and you've worked despite some of the challenges. And again, that's a call I make to all organizations that should be under this umbrella, that despite our personal differences, our political differences, we should put them aside when it comes to our ethnika siferoda, when it comes to the siferoda of the community, and go forward and put the agenda first and foremost ahead of all else. I also want to talk about democracy and our responsibility vis-a-vis democracy in the current context of social disruption and nationalism that is definitely the new wind that's blowing through the world. There seems to be now, with the ever-growing challenges of pandemics, economic crisis, as we've seen now, it's been a decade and a half of systemic economic growth has been a challenging objective for democratic Western countries around the world. We've seen the augmentation of the tyrannical regimes of China and Iran, and now, of course, one of the most brutal proponent of extremism in the world in President Erdogan in Turkey. And of course, we see this new wind of tyranny and anti-democratic regimes around the world at a time where, as I said at the beginning of our discussion, democracy is starting to be at its most fragile, frail point. And we need to come together, even in our own country of Canada, and defend it and not take it for granted. We look at now the geopolitical challenges of our motherland, Greece, and we recognize, of course, firsthand the challenges that Greece is facing right now from a neighbor who is not respectful of democratic tradition, is not respectful of the rule of international law, is not respective of human rights. We've seen their intransigence and their lack of respect in ignoring UN resolutions now for decades, and in being an invader of Cyprus and refusing to get out. We saw them recently, of course, trample upon the principles of freedom of religion by transforming the most iconic institution and building in the world, Hagia Sophia, into a mosque. And that was nothing more on the part of Erdogan than an attempt to fan the flames of religious intolerance. And we have to call this current regime of Erdogan what it is. It's a regime that is the largest supporter and financier of the Islamic Brotherhood around the world. and we need to call a spade and not hide our head in the sand. We saw Turkish aggression recently in Artsakh, or some call it Nagorno-Karabakh. And of course, the Western world, with great disappointment, has been burying their heads in the sand, including our own government here in Canada. We've seen Turkey in the Aegean over the last few months being belligerent and transcending basic international rule of law by infringing upon Greek waters on a consistent basis. And again, President Macron in France and others, most of the Western democratic world, again, has been kowtowing, appeasing, and tolerating this behavior, sometimes for reasons difficult to understand. We have an obligation as Hellenes in this country, as Canadian Hellenes, to lobby our governments, to lobby our politicians, to educate them. Because in large part, what I've been doing with my colleagues the last few months is in large part educating them and trying to make them understand the history, the knowledge that's rooted in our democracy and rule of law, which right now we have, like I said, regimes around the world that are not respectful of that. Greece is a country, of course, that's surrounded right now in the Balkans, a very dangerous territory, but funny enough, as was the case with the Byzantine Empire, as was the case, of course, through the history and centuries, Greece is at the front line in defending democracy, freedom against barbarism and lack of democracy and the rule of law. And once again, Greece finds itself in that situation. And I think we have a unique opportunity not to lobby as Greeks who happen to be Canadian citizens. I believe these are fundamental principles that are rooted in who we are. That's what Canada is all about. It's rooted on the principle of democracy. As I said earlier, some people think even in our country that our diversity is our strength. I think diversity is the element of and the components of our Canadian citizenship, but unity is our strength. And we have an opportunity to lead the way as Canadians of Hellenic descent to remind our fellow Canadians, doesn't matter of what ethnic background they are, that democracy and freedom is a wonderful thing. That when I support, for example, the independent Republic of Greece against the aggressions of a Turkish regime, tyrannical regime in Erdogan in the Aegean, I don't do it as a Greek Canadian. I do it as a Canadian who respects the principles of freedom and democracy. When I stand up and I fight for the rights of the people of Artsakh and the Armenian community, I don't do it as a Hellene who happens to be fighting back on a geopolitical issue from an ethnic political perspective. I do it as a Canadian who believes in the principle of democracy and freedom, which is so essential to who we are. So to wrap it up, colleagues, like I said, I think our community has a lot to be proud of. We're facing challenges, which I know the people on this call and in our community will come together and try to restructure our community to be a little bit more representative of the evolving changes in our community, our demographic changes, our ethnic changes, our linguistic changes. And I also do believe that if we go back and we look at the roots of Hellenism, democracy, civil responsibility, we can apply those as fantastic Canadian citizens in the 21st century while defending democracy and freedom around the world, which we know, again, our motherland of Greece, which is right in the heart of some of the geopolitical challenges in regards to its democracy. We can support them with fervor, and we can support them with pride. And I will finish off by saying, dear friends, never hesitate to speak the truth, to speak it loudly. We live in an era of political correctness, but I think if we continue to fall into that trap of political correctness, we will allow tyrants and brutal regimes around the world to take our appeasement approach to things as a sign of weakness. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Ζήτω η Ελλάδα, ζήτω ο Καναδάς, ζήτω η ελληνική παροικία σε όλο τον Καναδά και σε όλο τον κόσμο.
Thank you, Senator Husako, for your very passionate and encouraging presentation. Please turn on your camera. Senator, where are you?
Am I back now?
Yeah. Costa, κλείσε το camera σου, please. Okay. I'd like to open the floor to anyone that may have any questions or comments to Senator Husako. Raise your hand, please, and the senator will call your name. if there are any questions or comments.
I do not. Do I see the hands raising? Because I don't see that, Angie, right now.
No, I don't either.
They're all shy.
George Manos. There he is.
Senator, thank you for your insightful remarks. I think are appropriate given our times, both in the world and in the health area. My question is, from your perspective, what would be the process to have a dialogue with the various differences of opinion as to how Hellenism should be advanced in Canada? That is my first question. And the second question, it's more of a political one. Given the COVID mess that we have right now, how can small business in Canada survive? I don't mean survive the current pandemic. How can those businesses that have been shut down reconstitute it and redevelop? And what sort of ideas do you have as to how to re-energize those businessmen? Because, as you know, small business is the core of our economy.
Thank you, George. Regarding your first question, I think continue to do a lot of what we're doing here right now, which is reaching out to Canadians of Hellenic background and encouraging them to participate in the dialogue. I think we have a lot of organizations, and it's not a criticism, it's a reaction that normally happens, become complacent over time. We fall in a pattern of doing certain things, and I think we have to not be afraid of change and not be afraid of new ideas. Like I said, and I tried to explain it, maybe not clearly in my presentation, but we have right now three very unique demographics. We have, of course, the first generation wave of immigrants that came to Canada, who many of them now are making up the elderly portion of our population, that had a very specific outlook and objective and goals, and they've achieved the vast majority of them. And I think we have an obligation now to them to take care of them in their old age, to make sure they have the institutions and cares that they require. That's an ongoing challenge. But then we have my generation of second, third generation Hellenes that have a very different needs, different outlooks. They're more driven by the economic issues, their personal careers. They've integrated already, and thank God, by second, third generation Canadians of Greek descent, they're very integrated in our Canadian society. And that's where I get now into that third wave, those Canadians who see themselves as Canadians first and as Greeks second, should always see themselves ultimately as Canadian Hellenes. And that we can do by educating them, by having discussions with them. I take it upon myself to meet as many young people in our community across the country, and I talk to them on a regular basis about Hellenism. And I think, George, we shouldn't be afraid of transforming organizations. I look at this organization, which I love and admire. That's why I'm here. It's time for change. I see it. And I know you've tried to implement some change. And of course, when you try to implement change, it creates controversy. Because the truth of the matter is, the umbrella organizations, for example, and I speak Yatopiku Silos, for example, which again, I was an active member of and a proud member of the Silo Romagnaton in Montreal, they need to be transformed because there isn't that demand amongst our clientele for those organizations because, like I said, that third wave now of Hellenists require different services, different needs, and we also have we have a different objective in terms of where we need to go. So I don't have all the solutions, but all I do say is let's continue the dialogue, reach out to young people that aren't currently represented by some of the organizations that, for example, are our umbrella members of the Canadian Hellenic Congress. There's a lot of Hellenes that don't feel organizations represent their aspirations, and somehow we need to reach them. Your second question, and you're absolutely right, the Hellenic community is by and large entrepreneurial, small businesses, which is the backbone of the Canadian economy. The solution is very simple, and currently there's no appetite with this current government, and again, I will engage in a little bit of partisanship as a conservative, until such time in this country as we return back to the fundamentals of incentivizing work, incentivizing the entrepreneurial spirit, in stopping to print money as a reflex to solve every single economic difficulty that's out there, we will continue to bask in mediocrity. We will create stagnation and we will create inflation, which will lead to an invariable recession. We need to create a climate where you encourage and incentivize work, entrepreneurial spirit, and Canadians have to start asking the question, why has foreign investment in Canada gone from in the low 40 to 43 billion in 2015, 2014 fiscal year to now well under 60% of that figure? It's because foreign investment doesn't find, and foreign capital doesn't find this market to be conducive. And if this market's not conducive for big capital, it certainly cannot be conducive for small business. I also think when the history is written, and there I won't be partisan, I need to be fair, the truth of the matter is with the COVID pandemic, no government was prepared, and the truth is no government could have been prepared. And when the history is written on this pandemic, I think people will find that we should have focused more on herd immunization earlier on in the process and far less on these shutdowns, these at times knee-jerk reaction shutdowns, which have hurt particularly small business.
If you do have a question, next to your name, you have 3 dots. You can raise your hand. If you press on the 3 dots, you'll see that there's a raise hand. Theodore, you have something to say?
Yes. I don't know if you could hear me and see me.
Yes.
But it was based on something Senator Husako raised, and he's absolutely right about evolving times and evolving constituency of different organizations, Hellenic organizations throughout Canada. The Canadian Hellenic Congress is a Tritovathmio organization, and traditionally it's been built up from ethnotopicous silos, as it's our 38th annual convention. So it's been around for 30-some years, which at that point, the feeder groups were definitely ethnotopicous silos, like the Laconians, Cretans, Kephalonitas, etc., etc., etc. Unfortunately, because they helped create this Canadian Hellenic Congress, their raison d'etre is somehow changing, and by second, third generations, a lot of times the young people don't have the necessity to belong to those groups. There is a provision in our Constitution, and I think more as time goes on and passes by, the need will be to accept individual members, as we have already started doing. There are individual members. We mean that it could be somebody educated, an academic, a professional, a business person who's Greek by origin, a proud Canadian, but he wants to contribute, let's say, to the Canadian Hellenic Congress. And he doesn't belong to an ethnotopicos silo, or he might not belong to other organizations which are evolving with time, embracing Hellenes of Canadians of Hellenic origin. So the different means with which you could enter the Canadian Hellenic Congress has to evolve, so we have representation that is indicative of today's times and times of the futures. Therefore, we should be able to accept individual members who want to contribute to the Canadian Hellenic Congress.
Thank you, Theodore. Are there any other questions or comments anyone would like to make? No? Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Finally, well, before I go on to, George Manos has his hand up.
Sorry, since nobody seems to want to have a conversation with the senator, so I'm going to raise a political question with you on this occasion. As you know, Senator, you were part of the motion in the Senate to recognize the Greek Podian genocide. That unfortunately died in the Senate. From a political perspective, and being a member of the Conservative Party, would you and the party advance this motion either in its current form or in a variation form in the next Parliament, and see whether or not the parties in Parliament or in the Senate have the bone to do the injustice that has been done for years and recognize the Greek Podian genocide as a tragedy and a heinous crime against humanity, not just against Greek Hellenes from Pontus.
Thank you for that question, and I absolutely am committed to that. You know that I don't waver. I'm proud about the fact that myself and Senator Panna Merchant, in a very nonpartisan fashion, tabled the motion to recognize the Pontian genocide. I'm also proud of the fact that from the 23 votes in favor of the motion, 22 of those were Conservative senators, and one was a independent Liberal senator, Serge Royal. The truth of the matter is this current government, Mr. Trudeau's current government, not a single one of his appointed senators voted in favor of that motion. And for anybody to believe that wasn't because that they were whipped by the Prime Minister's office to do so would be disingenuous and hypocritical to the immense degree. I'm also proud of the fact that the leadership of the Conservative Party, from former leader Andrew Scheer to current leader Aaron O'Toole, all spoke out publicly and made a declaration condemning Turkey when they converted Hagia Sophia again in the most belligerent fashion into a mosque, transforming a giant of symbolism of Christianity and Greek Orthodoxy around the world in a spirit of anti-democratic and anti-religious tolerance on the part of the Erdogan administration. I also want to point out that we should never, and again, I'm going to be a little bit more firm, doesn't matter our political colors, when we're promoting Hellenism, democracy, freedom, rule of law, human rights, these are all deep-spirited elements of Hellenism and what it means to promote Hellenism around the world. We should never waver. And I would never waver, and I would never play political games to defend my party if I ever saw them doing what this current Trudeau government is doing. On the Turkish issue of aggression towards Greece and the Aegean, our current government hasn't said a word, not a single word in condemnation against Turkey. Turkey has blood on its hands in providing Canadian military technology in contravention of our own Canadian ban to sell military weapons to Turkey, and this government gave them an exemption, and that military equipment was used in murdering innocent women and children of Armenian descent in Nagorno-Karabakh, used by the Azeri Azerbaijan government. And again, our Trudeau government, the only thing they can say after the fact is we're going to investigate to see how the exemption was granted to Turkey and allowed Canadian military weapons to fall in the hands of the Azerbaijanis, which were used against free people, indigenous people of Artsakh. And of course, we all see the circumstances now that have evolved. When our Canadian government loses its moral authority to stand up for these principles, we have to call them out. And I call upon Hellenes and Phil-Hellenes in that Liberal caucus to speak up when it comes to Turkish aggression on the Democratic Republic of Greece. When we see Turkish supplying of military equipment to Azerbaijan against the democratic state of Armenia, we need to speak up. When our government doesn't speak up and we stay silent, we become complicit in what I consider a tragedy.
Thank you, Senator. Before I let anyone else comment or ask a question, I'd ask Mr. Saras to please turn off his camera. There's a little button on the bottom that has a camera, picture of a camera. Just press on it. Υπάρχει μία εικόνα από κάτω. Έτσι, μπράβο. Ευχαριστώ. Κύριε Σούδα, έχετε κάποια ερώτηση? Ανοίξτε το μικρόφωνο, έτσι.
I just have two questions for the senator. Senator, is there currently a Canadian of Greek origin in the House of Commons on the Conservative side?
Currently, there isn't.
There isn't. The other element that I wanted to offer as parliamentary process. So right now we have a Greek Canadian senator who tabled a motion in the Senate to recognize the Pontian genocide. There is a process in our parliamentary system in the House of Commons whereby any MP can table either a private member's motion or a private member's bill. Given the fact that there is no Greek Canadian within the Conservative caucus, it is very well known that there are 3 Greek Canadian members of parliament in the Liberal caucus, Ms. Koutrakis, Ms. Labropoulou, and this gentleman from London, Ontario, who, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't really recognize his Greek ancestry. My question is, why has the Canadian Hellenic Congress, and you should, put pressure on these Greek Canadian MPs, Ms. Labropoulou and Ms. Koutrakis, to table a motion, just like Mr. Kousakos did, in order to recognize the Pontian genocide? As for those 2 MPs, Ms. Labropoulou and Ms. Koutrakis, this should be a no-brainer, and they have the parliamentary powers through private member motions and private member bills that do not require the approval of the Prime Minister's office or the Minister of Foreign Affairs before doing so.
You're absolutely correct, Dimitri. So that question is more, I think, directed towards the Canadian Hellenic Congress, but you're absolutely right. There are 3 Canadians of Hellenic descent right now, including Mr. Fladziskakos, who's an MP from London, Ontario, Mrs. Lambropoulou, who's an MP for Saint Laurent, and Kyria Koutrakis. And there's a number of Liberal MPs that pretend that they're Philhellenes. Like, of course, our Liberal Member of Parliament for Laval-Les-Îles, which Laval-Les-Îles has the largest number of Hellenes in any riding in Canada, Faisal Khoury. So these are all these MPs, you're absolutely right, have the power to table a private member's bill in recognizing the Pontian genocide. Absolutely. So why they haven't done it? That's the question. That's a very good question you ask.
Okay, I'll take one more question. Senator, I see 2 hands. I'm going to ask you to pick one.
I will let you. I see a couple of hands. I see Mr.
It's the last hand, so you pick it.
So let's let the president have the last word.
Okay, Theodore.
Okay, I could hear me, I guess, see me. Yeah, we've been promoting having the Canadian government recognize the Greek Pontian genocide now for the past few years. We've communicated directly with the Prime Minister. We've had many efforts to have this recognition done. We've given different options to the Prime Minister. And again, the question is about Greek origin members of Parliament of the Liberal Party, the 3 that you mentioned. They've always been CC'd on our communications. We've had direct meetings with them. They're very well aware of the request that we've made of Prime Minister Trudeau and of the Liberal Party, the government, to have this recognition done. We've given in the past suggestions with regards to bringing a motion to Parliament. We've in the past a suggestion of an order in council that would have been possibly done by the Prime Minister. And just before the previous elections, we had asked for him to take the initiative and do a proclamation. In a direct meeting with the Prime Minister, face-to-face here in Montreal in July of last year, I put the question to him once again, and his suggestion was that this would not be possible before the elections. However, he would be looking into this proclamation or order in council or a resolution come the new term. In January of this year, we sent again another letter to the Prime Minister requesting this recognition. And in my latest meeting that I had with Minister Champagne in a virtual meeting, again, we brought up this question of the recognition. If we've directly and on our own asked the members of Parliament independently, we have, during our presentations, we have CC'd them, but we haven't picked one of them or another to directly bring the resolution to the to Parliament. We've made efforts with this Liberal government and specifically with Prime Minister Trudeau.
If I may just conclude as well, and I know that the Canadian Hellenic Congress has done a lot of work on this. Unfortunately, let's hope that Prime Minister Trudeau is quicker at coordinating a vaccine campaign than he has been in recognizing the Pontian genocide, because the truth is, if he had an interest in doing it, it would take him exactly a few minutes to walk to a microphone and make a declaration as Prime Minister of Canada. I want to share this final piece of advice to the organization, because I had meetings last week with the Armenian National Committee of Canada. I've had discussions with my friends that do lobbying for the Jewish community in Canada. And as Canada grows and evolves, because it's not just the community, the Hellenic community that's evolving, our numbers are diminishing in terms of, and you know, politicians are influenced by numbers, by votes. So we're a small community compared to some other communities in Canada, be it Muslim, Chinese, South Asian. The Jewish community, and I said this to them and they took it with a grain of salt. I said, you don't have the same influence that you did 25 years ago, because again, we have been overtaken by Muslim and Hindu and Chinese communities. The Jewish community and Greek community in terms of population is very similar in size. The Armenian community is even smaller. But the message I sent to them, and I'm sharing it with you, Theodore, and our fellow Greeks, is we believe in democracy. We believe in freedom. We believe in freedom of religion and human rights. If you look at Armenia, Greece, Israel, our communities, these are the Hellenistic elements that are so fundamental to Hellenism that they all believe in. So I know you've also done this. You've reached out to these communities and you're coordinating work with them, which is, I want to compliment you on it. And I believe you have something there. I think if we can continue to grow that, and if people like me and others continue to share that message with them, that guys, once upon a time, the Jewish community was powerful all on its own. But now you might need the 350,000 Greeks with you. You might need the 100,000 Armenians, and together we can influence things a lot more easily.
On that point, Mr. Husako, we've worked with the Armenian National Committee of Canada on several occasions. We've supported your motion for Artsakh. We've sent letters to 30 companies that manufacture military weapons that were being sold to Turkey. We've worked with CIJA, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, with regards to the embargo that was started in October of 2019. We sent a joint letter with the Armenians, with the Jewish community, and with the Kurdish community. So we are doing that, and we're trying to put our forces together, and we hope that they will support us with the Pontian Greek genocide. Thank you.
Well done.
As much as I would like to take more comments or questions, and what's nice is that it's encouraging to see that there's a discussion going on, and it would be nice that we can have discussions going on all the time as Hellenes. I'm gonna let Senator Husako go for now. Later on, there will be more questions and discussions at the end of our conference. So I would like to continue with our next guest speaker, Professor Maggiorini, who has an equally important topic for us today. His topic, 200 Years of the Modern Senate of Greece, whence it came and where it's heading. But first, I'd like to remind everyone of the rules. For those of you that just came in, please keep your camera off and your microphone off so that we can give Professor Maggiorini the stage. Professor Maggiorini holds 3 degrees from McGill University, BA Joint Honors Economics and Political Science, Master's and PhD in Economics. He is also a certified management consultant. He has been teaching economics for nearly 40 years at McGill University School of Continuing Studies, as well as at John Abbott College. He has authored 5 textbooks in economics and written numerous articles in professional journals. He has been twice awarded the Distinguished Teaching Award at McGill, 1993 and 2006. He is a founder and a managing partner of Canbeck Economic Consultants, Incorporated, a management consulting and macroeconomics forecasting and investment advisory firm. Ken has served on numerous boards, including the International Organization of Psychophysiology, the Board of Governors at McGill University, John Abbott College, and Trafalgar School for Girls. He is a founding member of the Hellenic Board of Trade of Metropolitan Montreal and economic advisor and member of the Board of Directors of the National Bank of Greece, Canada. A longtime member of AHEPA, he has served as Montreal Chapter President, District Governor, and more recently as the Canadian President of AHEPA 2014 to 2016. He is the Vice Chairman of the AHEPA Family Charitable Foundation of Canada, and he has a deep-seated interest in Greece's geopolitical security in Southeast Europe, as well as issues surrounding the religious freedoms and the preservation of the cultural heritage of the Christian Orthodox communities in the Middle East. He believes that the 350,000 strong Hellenic Canadian community should break with a strong and united voice in Canadian affairs and be engaged in the policy-making process. I would like to now open the floor to Professor Maggiorini. Professor Maggiorini, please open your camera.
I have. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
If you go back to the first page of the presentation, I have some words to say before we begin the slideshow presentation. First of all, I'd like to thank the Canadian Hellenic Congress and Theodore in particular for the invitation for me to speak today at the 38th annual meeting of the Congress. I'm deeply honored and humbled by this invitation. Humbled especially because it regards a topic that in my heart is the most sacred, which is my patrida, η Ελλάδα, ο Ελληνισμός, Hellenism, ecumenical Hellenism. So it's been a big challenge for me to come up with, to prepare my thoughts and my remarks today, because Hellenism, our history, our legacy is so immense, so huge. I don't know where to begin, where to end. So I thank you again, and I will try to do my best. Because there's so much, I prepared a PowerPoint presentation in PDF form so that everybody can be shared after the meeting, because there's a lot more to say than I can transmit in 30 minutes. But I will go very quickly through the presentation. The key topics I want to touch upon is what were the factors behind the resurrection of the modern Greek state? More briefly, what were the successes and failures of the modern Greek state in the past 200 years? And what are the challenges facing the state of Greece, more specifically, as we go into the 3rd century? Okay, and I'll end with a personal reflection of how I see things unfolding as we move forward in the future. But before I start, I'd like to congratulate and thank our beloved senator and archon of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, Leo Housakos. Leo, you spoke amazingly well, in my view, very correctly. You articulated in a magnificent manner what Hellenism is about, what our role as Hellenes, as Greeks, as Canadians is in this society and in the world. You've done a magnificent work, and all I can say is that what I have to say is in full synchronously, is in full, agrees fully with the spirit and the words of what you said. So Angie, who has the control of the slide, because I cannot have it. So if you can skip to the next page, and we'll try to go through this quickly because time is of the essence. Angie, can you change the page?
Angie, please advise Ken that I have control.
Pelagia, you have control?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so in kind of a brief summary, the Greek nation never ceased to exist. The Greek nation has existed continuously for at least 3,500 years. So when we talk about the creation of the modern state of Greece, it's no surprise it did not come out of anywhere. The nation of Greece and Hellenism was already there and very, very active and very, very strong, even under Ottoman rule. The second major point I want to make is that Hellenic civilization, the Greek language, Hellenism, the ideas, the concepts of Hellenism, of rationalism, of freedom, liberty, democracy, of humanity, of humanism, of art and culture and love of life. This is a powerful, the most powerful idea that people are willing to die for. I came up this morning with the name Weapons of Mass Enlightenment. It's a super weapon that we have in our hands, and we have to use more, because this is a weapon that has kept our civilization and the Greek nation alive, but it is what will sustain us moving forward, given the challenges of the future. The other points I want to raise is the important role of the Greek diaspora, because it's been extremely important throughout the ages. The Greek colonies around the Mediterranean were part of the Greek diaspora. We in Montreal are part of the Greek diaspora. The role that the Canadian-Hellenic Congress, that the AHEPA in Canada, the United States, and around the world, and all the other community organizations we have, are part of the same structures that have existed since the archaic times of the colonization. And the modern state of Greece owes a lot to the diaspora, the Greeks, Pandachous ton Kosmo, what I call the ecumenical Hellenism. Another point I want to raise is the Philhellenes, the role of the Philhellenes. They've always been Philhellenes. We attract, we don't repel. And the Philhellenes have played a very important role in the creation of the modern Greek state. Now, I won't have much time today to talk about the benefactors. I'm just briefly touch about it at the end of the presentation. But prosperous Greeks, ship owners, people in commerce and business, donated massively to create institutions of the modern state of Greece. And it's important to recognize the initiative of these people to donate and give back to Hellenism and to Greece. And last but not least, the important role of our Greek Orthodox Christian faith. Very, very, very important. Because I just want to outline very quickly for everybody to hear. When some people say, well, Hellenism was about the 12 gods of Olympus and Christianity came from the Jews, I want to say the following, that Hellenism is the natural evolution of Greek philosophy, especially the Platonic one. Science is more of the Aristotelian side. Christianity is the Platonic side. It is an evolution of Greek society. And as Greek Orthodox Christians, we have to be proud of our Christian identity because that carries the Hellenic ideas of Plato, Socrates, and so many Hellenistic philosophers. Okay, so all I just wanted to start with. Now, if you can move to the next slide, Pelagia. If you can turn to the next slide, so I can begin my brief, my quick, good. So we'll go through these. I'll touch very, very briefly because time is very, very important. Now, the four founding tribes of Greece, the Achaeans, the Aeolians, and the Dorians. Leo Housakos comes from a very proud heritage. The Maniates are Dorians, okay? Mani was never occupied by the Turks. They were never able to. So, you know, the connections are still there. During the Archaic period, in Greece, a very mountainous region, rocky, scattered with islands, thousands of islands. Every island is a mountaintop. Created a very diverse environment for character and for opinion and ideas. But it was all united by the sea. The sea was the internet, the highway that connected these the Greeks in this region. The next slide. So these, please turn to the next slide. Angie, turn to the next slide, Pelagia. And despite of their diversity, these Greeks were able to stage the first Olympic Games all the way back in 684 BC. Can we change the slide? Now, here it shows the colonies. The colonies, the Greeks created over 350 colonies, all in the Black Sea, the Mediterranean, even beyond the Gibraltar. The slide has disappeared. So the Greeks settled, when you look at the Europe, the Mediterranean, the whole region, that is Greece. Those are Greeks. That's Hellenism. That's our culture and civilization. That's basically what unites us. Moving to the next slide. Between the 5th and 3rd centuries BC, the Greeks developed a classical civilization of Athens, of Pericles. There seems to be a problem. There's sound. Someone can please unmute your so in the 3rd and 5th centuries, Greeks, invented democracy, the rule by the people. And they set up unique institutions to govern themselves under the rule of law. They elevated individual rights and freedoms to the front and center of daily life, and they prized individual human excellence. Now, despite their diverse attitudes, lifestyles, narrow self-interest, they were able to unite, and they united to fight the Persians in Marathon, in Salamis, in Plataea, and so many other places. King Philip had the vision of getting back to the Persians and prepared the Persian invasion, which his son Alexander the Great carried out. With Alexander the Great's conquest, he spread Hellenism all the way out to the depths of Asia, to the depths of Central Asia, where Turkmenistan near Mongolia, just off China, and the India, past the Indus Valley, and down south in Egypt and Sudan. So the Greek ideals, the Greek values of rationalism, the Greek way of thinking, of organizing life, of being empirical, of being humanistic, of the love for learning, for knowledge, for enlightenment, was spread throughout. And guess what happens? It created the Hellenistic civilization. The Hellenistic civilization, when we go to school, we don't learn enough. We don't learn a lot about the Hellenistic civilization. The Hellenistic civilization lasted for more than two to 3 centuries, following the conquest of Alexander the Great around 323 BC from his death, all the way till Augustus' time, the time when Jesus Christ was born. And so this 3-century period, the Jews became Hellenized. The Syrians became Hellenized. A lot of the Persians and the peoples of the region became Hellenized. They became indistinguishable from the Greeks. And Alexander's successors built very successful and prosperous kingdoms in Seleucia, in Afghanistan, and of course, most of all, in Egypt, in Alexandria. Alexandria emerged, and if you can move to the next slide, Pelagia, the new center of Hellenism, the new center for Hellenism, it became a center of commerce and finance and a principal scientific research center. If you could change the slide. Please change the slide. The other way. Go back one, or at least leave it there. The Museum, that's right. Many of the great wonders of the ancient world go back to this period. The Colossus of Rhodes, the Lighthouse of Alexandria. But most important is the Museum of Alexandria. You can move to the next slide, Pelagia. The Museum and the Library of Alexandria. The Museum was an institution that brought together some of the best scholars of the Hellenistic world, analogous to a modern institute for advanced study and research, More than 1,000 scholars lived in the museum at any given time. Some of the scholars that are known to have studied there are Archimedes, the father of engineering, Aristarchus of Samos, Callimachus, a noted poet, Erasistratos, and Herophilus, physician and co-founder of the Academy of Medicine, Eratosthenes, who argued for a spherical Earth and calculated its circumference to near accuracy. The Westerners people think that Copernicus discovered that, the Earth is round. Well, the ancient Greeks knew that all along. Euclid, the father of geometry. Herophilus, notable physician and the founder of the scientific method. Hipparchus, the founder of trigonometry. Pappus, mathematician. And Hero, the father of mechanics. He developed the first steam engine, the Kythera device that was discovered. The most advanced computer of the time was probably developed by people in Hero's lab in the Library of Alexandria, being transported to Syracuse, where Archimedes and his lab were sitting in Sicily, in Mega Grecia, in the south of Italy. Now, the significance of the Hellenic period is very important. The key outcomes is that Greek emerged as the international language of commerce, science, education, and culture, became the lingua franca. What English is in our world today, Greek was in that world, in the Hellenistic era, throughout the known civilized world. The Athenian drachma became the leading currency of the known world, from Gibraltar to the Hindus in India. To receive education was to learn the Greek language and philosophy and science. Alexandria succeeded Athens as a financial center the same way New York succeeded London in the 20th century. For the Greeks, the Hellenistic kingdoms of the East became what America and the New World represent today. The peoples of the East, the Jews, the Egyptians, Syrians, all started receiving and learning Greek education. And to learn the Greek concepts and ideas, they need to learn Greek. So became masterful practitioners of Greek. The Greek language evolved. It was always varied. The Attic version, that is the one we know best, is just one of the dialects, one of the versions. The Kini Greek was basically what was spoken by all these people. So as people settled, so that was the Hellenized world. Now let's move to the next slide. Then came the rise of Rome. Now, with the rise of Rome, the military and political hegemony moved away from Greek hands to Roman hands. Following the defeat of Macedonia and the destruction of Corinth in 146 BC, and the annexation of Ptolemaic Egypt around 31 BC, where Cleopatra was the last of the Ptolemies, Rome came in charge of the region. Now, who were the Romans? The Romans were analogous, they're basically first cousins with the Greeks. They had been deeply influenced by the Greeks throughout the 70 Greek colonies that existed in Magna Grecia and on the Italian peninsula. They shared the same gods as the Greeks, and their alphabet is almost the same as the Greek. It's basically a small variation of the Greek alphabet. Despite being ruled by Rome, much of Greek culture, language, and civilization remained the same and had a heavy influence on Roman culture. The Romans did not extinguish Greek culture. Instead, they assimilated it thoroughly, embracing Greek philosophy, arts, literature, and spread them on top of it widely throughout the Roman Empire. The Romans, like Cicero, studied in Athens, Asia Minor, and Rhodes, and translated to Latin the works of Hellenistic philosophers, that later were to influence European philosophers in the Enlightenment of Europe. The Romans would send their sons to Greece to learn Greek and study Greek science, medicine, and philosophy. As the Roman poet Horace declared, Greece the captive took her savage victor captive. In other words, we may have conquered the Greek lands, but the Greeks conquered us. The biggest fellaline of them all, of the Roman emperors, most of them loved Greece and spent lavishly on Greece, was Emperor Hadrian. He renovated the Hadrian Library, the Panathenaic Stadium in Athens. He rebuilt the Temple of Zeus, and the Athenians honored him with the Hadrian's art. When we visit Athens, what we see is, Emperor Hadrian's constructions in Athens. Life continued much the same way throughout the Roman Empire. And during that period, Greece actually enjoyed the longest stretch of peace and stability and prosperity that it had not enjoyed before. Now, moving over to the next one, Alexander's conquest of the East enabled the spread of the Greek language, philosophical thought, ideas, and ways of life across the Near East. There were two very important unintended consequences. The first, it paved the way for the teaching of Jesus from Nazareth. The conceptualization of God as one, monotheism, love, agape, forgiveness, and redemption, sihoresi. The second is that it set up a communication network whereby these ideas could be transmitted through a common language, defined concepts and ideas. So the language was the medium that translated these ideas throughout all the other nations and spread them. The powerful ideas of love, forgiveness, that Jesus came to earth to give us. And the Roman conquest, at the same time, helped spread these ideas, like a second round, once through Alexander's, the South and Hellenistic period, and the second time through the Roman period. The language in which most of the apostles of Christ, such as Paul, Andrew, and John, and all the great fathers of early Christianity, such as Basil, Gregory, and John the Chrysostom, wrote, preached, and argued in Greek, right? It's basically a Greek philosophy. Jesus of Nazareth is known to the world by his Greek name, which is Christos, from the Greek word chryzo, which means I anoint. Christianity is a Greek word that represents the fusion of Greek philosophy, especially Neoplatonic thought, that flourished during the Hellenistic period in Alexandria and Athens. Greek Orthodox Christianity, in fact, is a fusion of Greek philosophical thought, Judaism, and Eastern mysticism. Now, by the beginning of the 3rd century AD, after Christ, the Roman Empire becomes difficult to administer. Emperor Diocletian devises the tetrarchy, a means to manage a huge empire, and it was divided into two, the eastern part and the western part, with the Edict of Milan of 1313 and then the Edict of Thessaloniki in 380. They decided to legalize Christianity and then legalize all other religions as well with the Edict of Thessaloniki. In 325, Emperor Constantine convenes the First Council of Nicaea, to define the Nicaean Creed, the Holy Trinity that defines the Father, Christ and the Son and the Holy Spirit as the three divinities of God. In 330 AD, Emperor Constantine moves his capital to Byzantium, the Greek colony of Byzantium, and founds Constantinople, the Vasilevousa, the reigning city and the greatest city on this planet that has ever existed. Now, with the western half of the empire besieged with barbarian invasions after the fall of Rome in 476 AD, the eastern half of the empire emerges as the only surviving part. The Eastern Roman Empire was more stable, prosperous, and civilized and easier to defend. It lasted 1,123 years, from 330 to 1453. The currency, interestingly, that Constantine the Great introduced, the solidus, or the bezant as it was called, was never debased. The amount of gold it contained remained the same for 900 years. This is a message for the Americans to remember who keep debasing the US dollar. One of the reasons the empire lasted, what helped the empire last so long, was sound currency. Constantinople was the most populated city and the most prosperous city, with running water, with sewage system, with countless schools and institutions. The defining characteristics of the Roman Empire, just to summarize quickly, it was a Greek. So if someone asks, so what is Byzantium? Because a lot of people ask this question. Well, it was a Greek-speaking, completely Hellenized, and of Greek Orthodox Christian faith. Just as Leo Housakos earlier said, with this diversity, but there's unity. Byzantium was unity, but unity of all these diverse parts that formed Hellenism. Latin was used along with Greek for administrative purposes and diplomatic purposes until the 6th century, and even afterwards till the end, but it was Greek that became the dominant language. Now, the ethnic composition was multi-ethnic, predominantly Greek, as you can see from this chart, but it included Armenians, Khazars, Slavs, Serbs, Goths, Syrians, Illyrians. By the way, the modern, what we call ourselves modern Greek, are a combination of all these peoples who share the same ideals of Hellenism, the same values, the same way of thinking. Now, before I go on, just after this slide, now the citizens identified themselves as Christian, Greek-speaking Romans, Romi, because that was the name of the state. It was the Roman Empire, Romios, Romi. When we call themselves Romi, Romiosini, Putiles, the Seferis and all the great, Greek writers, Rigas Fereos, when we talk about Romiosini, that is who we are. Byzantine society valued knowledge and was profoundly educated. The literacy was extremely high for its time. They had an educational system that had been developed during the Hellenistic times, and they kept it all the way till the fall of Constantinople, consisting of 3 levels of education. Primary school, which existed in villages as well, secondary school in all towns, and higher education predominantly in Constantinople, but other centers as well, like Thessaloniki, Smyrna, and other cities. So it was not just boys that were being educated, girls as well. The place of women in Byzantium was for the epoch was unheard of in the rest of the world. So, and just the University of Constantinople, founded by Theodosius, Emperor Theodosius in 425 AD. It had 31 shares: law, philosophy, medicine, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, music, rhetoric, the whole works. 15 in Latin, 16 in Greek. The university existed until the fall of Constantinople. And there were various schools, economic schools, libraries, academies, throughout the empire. Now, before I continue, I just want to quote something I just, I found this morning while, preparing some of my thoughts. Edith Hall is a classicist professor at King's College in Britain, in London. She wrote a book that says the diaspora was the root of the Greek miracle. So she's asked, how would you explain the Greek miracle? How is it that such a small place gave birth to such important concepts as democracy, free thinking, philosophy, rational science, and empirical medicine? And she answers, I make it clear in my book that this amazing development has nothing to do with racial superiority. Indeed, the Greeks themselves did not define their identity through blood. Herodotus, the father of history, defines it as a shared ancestry. Shared ancestry, excuse me. Herodotus defines it as a shared ancestry, rituals, way of life, and language. In the book, I try to define 10 aspects, she says. It's not an orthodox way of looking at it, but she says the Greek miracle has a lot to do with being in the right place at the right time to transform the achievements of other cultures in the surrounding regions, North Africa, the Levant, the ancient Near East, into something radically new. Curiosity and love of innovation are two of the features that I highlighted as being characteristic of ancient Greek culture, even today, along with love of travel and exploration. These characteristics were born out of a harsh necessity. The poverty of the Greek environment forced the ancient Greeks to travel and colonize not only the Mediterranean, but also the Black Sea. In our days, here in Canada, in America, in Australia, in Germany, in Russia, in South Africa, we're doing the same thing, carrying the same tradition. We're part of the same ethos. Because they did not have huge fertile floodplains to cultivate as the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians, they had to leave home, and the diaspora was at the root of the Greek miracle. I just wanted to share these thoughts because I run by this, had it in my computer, by accident this morning, and it is exactly the message that I'm trying to convey in my presentation. And it's exactly what Leo Housakos earlier told us. I mean, we're in such unison here. Just to remind that what the Canadian Hellenic Congress is doing with this, engagement today, what the Greek community organizations, what AHEPA are doing, we're continuing the same mission. So getting back to my slide presentation, and time is running quickly. More or less what happened. Eventually the Byzantine Empire could not, declined. A lot of it had to do with Black Death. With a lot of pandemics that were very common in cities where trade was taking place. And the defeat, of course, of the Byzantines in 1071 to the Seljuk Turks, and which had largely to do, as my brother reminded me the other day, because the Greeks did not have many children, whereas the barbarians did. So, you know, that's one of our weaknesses. We need to have more children. But eventually came the Ottoman rule. Now, a few words about the Ottoman rule. You know, being ruled by barbarians is never good. But let's look at the positive side. Aside from the conquest and control, they did not have much interest in the day-to-day operations. So they delegated all these responsibilities to the people they occupied, especially the Greeks. They continued to rely on the Byzantine form of administration. And because they were not as educated and civilized, they relied on the Christian, the Greeks in particular. They allowed their subjects to retain their religion and the ways of life. Mehmed the Conqueror appointed Patriarch Gennadios of Constantinople to rule over the Christians. As long as they paid their taxes, and, you know, they were mostly free to carry on with their lives. Of course, they were not allowed to ride on a horse. They were not allowed to bear weapons. Now, the school of the nation, η Μεγάλη του Γένου Σχολή, was founded right after the fall of Constantinople in 1454. I visited this school when I visited the Patriarchate 2 years ago. It's a remarkable school. This school trained the Greeks of the Ottoman Empire, of which the Phanariots are the best well known because they were the ones from the more elite families, you know, who lived in Constantinople, and you know, they ended up by the 17th and 18th century controlling the trade, the banking of the Ottoman Empire and its diplomatic missions, because the Turks didn't know many foreign languages, could not understand the Westerners, whereas the Greeks had been doing it for centuries. So they could easily, help the Ottomans in their relations with the rising Western powers. Then comes the Italian Renaissance. What is the Italian Renaissance? It came from the Greeks. The Greeks, as the Turks were coming in and as the empire was declining, the Greek scholars, started moving to Venice, to Genoa, and to other Italian city-states. And they brought with them Hellenism, and that gave rise to Renaissance. The rediscovery of humanistic values of Greek philosophy, that man is the measure of all things. They spread humanistic ideals through Italy, and from there they started spreading into France, into Holland, into Britain, into Germany, into the rest of Europe. Eventually, by the 17th, 18th century, that leads to the Age of Enlightenment. So finally, to force, ήρθε, the powerful mass weapon of mass enlightenment comes to the West. So the key ideas that the European Enlightenment brings is sovereignty of reason, scientific method, empiricism, which was the Hellenistic, the ancient Greek and Hellenistic ideas, the importance of knowledge and advanced ideals of liberty, progress, toleration, fraternity, constitutional government, separation of church and state. So these doctrines, become, again, the phoenix that bring back the Greek, the resurgence of modern Greece. At the same time, you had the rise of nation states, of Britain, of France, of Russia, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Then you get the French Revolution, because Enlightenment brought change, political change. So we see the American War of Independence, 1775. The French Revolution, 1789. The Haitian Revolution, 1791. This is an interesting piece of fact. Haitian Revolution Haiti became the first independent nation state of Latin America and the Caribbean. There's Hellenistic ideas spreading to the enslaved people of America. And guess which country recognized the first Hellenic Republic? Which was the first country to recognize the independence of Greece? It was Haiti. Yes. Then we have the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte and republicanism in Europe, the Napoleonic Wars, the spread change all across. And then comes the Greek awakening. Now, I need to spend some time here. The Greeks of the Ottoman Empire were operating the Greeks in the Ottoman Empire as a state within the state. Despite Ottoman rule, Greeks have never given up their love for knowledge, education, and their language in their cosmopolitan nature and progressive attitudes. The Orthodox Church was in a difficult position because the patriarch was entrusted by the Sultan to look after the Christians and make sure that they stayed loyal to the Sultan. But at the same time, the Greek Orthodox Church is the one that fostered, like a manna tapediatis. She retained all the Hellenic values of Greek philosophy, the Greek language, all the ideals of Hellenism were retained through the Greek Orthodox Church. And by the way, something I didn't mention earlier, the Byzantines, they wrote encyclopedias. Patriarch Photios of Constantinople wrote a whole encyclopedia of all the Greek classics that were taught at the university in Magnavra in Constantinople. So the Byzantines, even though they were very theocratic, they were also, kept alive Greek Hellenism. At the same time, Greeks were migrating massively out to the rising states of Europe to engage in trade, commerce, and business, looking in search for opportunity, right? The same spirit of courage, of travel, of exploration, of progress. They formed prosperous communities in Trieste, Odessa, Vienna, Marseille, and so many other cities. They built huge fortunes. And then these people, the Greek diaspora, of which Adamantios Korais, Anthimos Gazis, Eugenios Vulgaris, Nikiforos Theotokis, Neophrostos Doukas, Theophilos Kairis, Theoklitos Pharmakidis. These are called the teachers of the Greek nation. What I found interesting is most of them were priests, deacons. They were protected, sheltered by the Greek Orthodox Church. But they didn't stay just in the theological. They wrote the classics, and they explained them, and they translated them to Russian, to French, to other languages. And then they were translating European ideas into Greek for Greeks to read. The publication Hermes of Logios was founded in 1811 in Vienna, and it was a major publication that carried these ideas and these new concepts and ideas of enlightenment to the Greeks within the Ottoman Empire. If you can move and of course, the great visionary of them all, activist and martyr, Pelagia. If we could move to the next slide. Even more till move further, please. Again.
Quite a bit of lag. That's why it's taking long.
I see. And keep moving. Now, to the next one, which is Rigas Ferreos. Now, Rigas Ferreos is the one who wrote the Thurios. In the Thurios, he urges the Greeks and the Greek Orthodox peoples of the region to rise and fight tyranny and organize and form an independent, resurrect Greece and the Byzantine Empire. And in his famous hymn to freedom, «Καλύτερα μιας ώρας ελεύθερη ζωή παρά 40 χρόνια σκλαβιά και φυλακή». Okay. Now, unfortunately, he was arrested by the Turks and executed in Belgrade. And of course, the knowledge that, this great man, he's like a Lord Byron of the Greek Enlightenment. And everybody loved him. And, the news of that helped stimulate the desire for action. Another interesting publication of the time, the next slide, is Nomarchia, Ελληνική Nomarchia. Hellenic Nomarchy was a pamphlet that was published, right there, was published by an anonymous. The person who wrote it did not want to disclose their name in 1806 in Italy. It advocated the ideals of freedom, social justice, and equality as the main principles of a well-governed society, making it the most important theoretical monument of Greek republicanism. Its author argued for both social autonomy and national sovereignty, supported the Greek struggle for national liberation. Now, in this book, it's basically a call for rule of law. Rule of law, what we keep emphasizing in the Western world. Then we have the Φιλική Εταιρεία. One of the most important organizations in modern Greek history was the Φιλική Εταιρεία, established in ημέρα του Σταυρού, September 14th, 1814 in Odessa by Skoufaras, Xanthos, and Tsakalov. Φιλική Εταιρεία was an offshoot of Masonic lodges. The Greeks had become very involved in Masonic lodges from Corfu, when Italian links to Russia. Ioannis Kapodistrias was part of the Phoenix Log of Moscow. And the Φιλική Εταιρεία used the same principles in order to maintain secrecy, because if you want to plan a revolution against the Ottomans, you had to keep things in secret. Now, just before 1821, what was the geostrategic backdrop before the outbreak of the Greek War of Independence? Well, in 1815, Napoleon and republicanism had been defeated. The monarchs of Europe wanted to make sure that monarchy remained in control, that the monarchs remained in control. In the Congress of Vienna, they basically agreed to support each other and make sure that create stability and prevent any more revolutions and so forth. At the same time, there was the rise of the Russian Empire in the East that was growing and expanding continuously at the expense of the Ottoman Empire. So the Western powers had no interest in seeing another revolution. So they were not prepared to support the Greek War of Independence. And despite this, as typical of Greeks, despite all the odds, they go ahead with the revolution. So on February 21st, 1821, Alexandros Ypsilantis crosses the river into Moldavia. And on the 17th of March, the Greeks in Peloponneso get together and declare the independence of Greece, okay? With General Theodore Kolokotronis as the supreme leader of the Greek forces. Now, when you look at the next when you look at the next slide, it shows all the places where the Greek War of Independence, where the fighting against the Turks, the resurrection occurred. Many, many places, from all the way from Romania to Crete, from Epirus to Cyprus. They all arose, to Samos. Too bad the slide is not there. And the Turks react in their typical, I'm sorry to say this, typical barbaric way. So, pogroms in Constantinople, in Smyrna, in Thessaloniki, in other Greek cities. I mean, they hanged the Greek patriarch, of course. What else do you expect them to do? On the Greek islands, they did huge massacres. The first island to be massacred was my father's island, Samothraki, in the northeastern part of the Aegean. Between 6,000 and 10,000 men were murdered by the Turks. Then came Chios in 1822, where more than 50,000 people, men, women, children, were butchered by the Turks. Then came Sarah, when they killed over 6,000 people. I mean, in this image, you see it's Delacroix, the famous, French Fellaline, who painted, these images of the struggle and the pain that Greeks endured during the War of Independence. And then you have the Fellalines, starting with Lord Byron. Without the Greek diaspora, the countless felonies and the huge popular support for the Greek struggle by Europeans would not have happened, okay? So in them, the ideals of Hellenism were alive and well. And some of the there's many names. Where to start with? Lord Byron obviously is the one that, we hear all the time, but Jean-François Maxime Rimbaud, the French, who fought in the Greek War of Independence, Carl Friedrich Norman Ehrenfels, the German who left his blood in Greece in 1822, Samuel Gridley Hoe, the American, George Jarvis, another American who left his bones in Greece, Thomas Gordon, Sir Richard Church, who became the first head of the Greek army following the independence. So there's so many names that I don't know where to start and where begin and where to end. But I just want to note one thing, the Battle of Petta. In the Battle of Petta, a lot of the Fellalines were involved. And, just to read, they were defeated by Omer Vriones, but of the Fellalines killed included both Italian officers, Dania and Tarella, and the overall losses were 67 Fellalines killed, of whom 34 were German, 12 Italian, 9 Polish, 7 French, 1 Dutch, 1 Hungarian. Okay? This is the next is a painting of Jarvis, George Jarvis, the American, the son of an American diplomat in Europe who went and fought in the Greek War of Independence. Jarvis was a true Fellaline, there he is, who endangers his life to come to the aid of Greece and her people. Upon his arrival in Greece in 1822, he put the Fustanella. He taught himself to read and write Greek, and thereafter Greek fighters called them Capitan Zervas. Here's the American. He was a surgeon. He was the surgeon of the Greek army, but he was also involved in raising funds and helping out and setting up orphanages. He was called the Lafayette of the Greek Revolution. Even afterwards, he brought Greeks back to America. He sent money for orphanages for the Greeks who had perished during the War of Independence. what more to say? But the Turks would not want to let Greece go. So the Sultan asked Ibrahim Pasha of Egypt to attack Peloponnese, and Ibrahim and Ali Pasha sent his son Ibrahim with a huge army. 54 warships, 14,000 French-trained infantry, and they landed in Peloponnese, and they're the ones who besieged for the third time, and successfully, unfortunately, Missolonghi. The big fall of Missolonghi occurred in the hands of Ibrahim Pasha. At that time, the Greeks, were few. They were getting killed. There was a lack of resources. They were fighting with each other like a typical Greek way. It looked like the Greek Revolution was about to come to an end. But the fall of Missolonghi, it sent shockwaves around, both within the Greeks and around the world. When people realized that Peloponnesos will become a protectorate of the Sultan under ruled by Egyptians from Africa, the public opinion in the West could not take it anymore. So they decided that there's something to do about it. It was 7 years on that this was happening, 6 years already. And we're witnessing this butchery that was taking place. Now, so they decided to do something, but all they wanted is the great powers of the West, England and France, wanted to create autonomy, to at least protect the Greeks from extinction, while letting the Sultan basically be in control. And that is what, the Treaty of London in 1827, that's what they decided. But at the same time, they wanted to do something not only to help the Greeks, but because they didn't want the Russians to take over the Ottomans. They didn't want the Russians to intervene, because the Russians are Omothriski. We have share the same religion, Greek Orthodoxy. And they were afraid of that, so they were caught in the middle. So they sent a fleet in Peloponnesos in order to subdue Ibrahim Pasha and try to, control the situation. But when the fleet arrived, there was some kind of miscommunication, or rather, Admiral Edward Codrington, who was the Allied commander of the Allied naval force, kind of initiated the battle. I mean, it was, it kind of happened by mistake, but the end result is that they completely decimated the Ottoman fleet and the Egyptian fleet that was in Navarino. And that changed the picture. By that point, Greece, with the Battle of Navarino, Greece basically managed to survive. The Ottoman navy destroyed. But at the same time, there are still 40,000 Turks, soldiers in Greece. It was not over yet. So to Greece's good luck, finally Russia decides to start a war with Turkey. So the Russians start a war, and they send their troops all the way to the outskirts of Constantinople on the one hand, and in the Caucasus on the other end of the Ottoman Empire, forcing the hand of the Sultan. So this is where then they decided basically to to ask the Sultan to grant Greece full independence and full sovereignty. So that was the London Protocol of 1830. You see, it's quite complicated, and for anybody to understand. But then there was the problem of monarchy or republic. They wanted to create an independent Greek state, but they also wanted it to be a monarchical state. So, when Capodistrias was assassinated, and the promise of a Hellenic Republic was shoved, they proposed to bring a king, the young son of the Bavarian Felaline king of Bavaria, King Ludwig, and they brought Otto into Greece. And there's the next slide is a picture of, there's Capodistrias, and the next one is the picture of King Otto. Now, very quickly, now the next slide is important, shows the territorial expansion of Greece from 1832 to 1923. As you can see, the modern state of Greece was very, very tiny, composed of Sterea Ελλάδα and Peloponnesos and the Cycladic Islands. During the course of the next 100 years, 80 years, Greece expanded territorially to Thessaly, Macedonia, Epirus, Thrace, the Ionia, where Smyrna. Of course, after the Smyrna catastrophe, we were pushed back. But by 1923, with the Treaty of Lausanne, we get the modern, current borders of the state of Greece established. If we could move over to the next slide, please. Now, the previous one, if you can. Now, in closing, was the modern state of Greece a success? And the answer, more or less, is yes, it was. When we compare Greece to all the other Balkan countries, Greece was the first to declare independence, the first to achieve full sovereignty, the one that grew the most. It is the one that has the highest GDP. It has been the most successful, without a doubt. Has modern Greece had its share of failures? Yes, it has. The Mikrasiatiki catastrophe, the mishandling of the situation back then by the king. Did it have, the civil war and the communist insurgency in Greece following the Second World War really set back. And I would say the years of the Pan-Hellenic socialist movement in Greece, spreading ideas that you can get money without doing any work, and that you should work for the state, and undermining the institutions of Greece through, politicizing them and undermining them. I believe that set the stage for the economic crisis that Greeks suffered the last 10 years. But I don't want to say more of this right now. On the positive side, Greece has emerged, as member of the European Union, member of the currency union, a founding member of the United Nations, of the euro currency, so many other international organizations. So by and large, I would declare Greece a success. Could Greece have done better? Yes, we can all do better, but Greece has done remarkably well despite all the challenges, despite the fact that 10% of the Greek population died during the Second World War. 10%. Greece suffered the highest per capita casualties of any other country during the Second World War. The physical damage on Greek infrastructure was immense. Despite all this, Greeks came back and back and back, always recovered. And they will, and this will continue. Now, where are we going from here into the future? The only things I have to say, because I've exceeded my time and I apologize for this, but what I want to say is the following. Greece needs a new vision today. Needs a new vision. It has to understand that it has to increase its population. There are many Greeks out there in Cyprus, in Egypt, in Russia, who cannot get their Greek citizenship because they cannot prove that they're ethnic Greek. Although they're Greek Orthodox, they have Greek names, they speak Greek. That's a shame. The Israelis, the Germans, have allowed citizens or homoethnies, citizens who identify as Jews or Germans to receive citizenship. Greece has to do this right away. Greece has to reinforce its institutions. The Greek universities, the Greek educational system has to become more liberalized. It has to return to what it has always been, the center of learning, so we can spread our knowledge and our ideas to the rest of the world. Instead of Greeks going to study in other universities, the rest of the world should come and study in Greek universities. I also found this morning by accident, but just as I was preparing, an article, research by a Turkish economist at the Technical University of Istanbul, who collected information about academics in the United States. He looked at academics in the United States, professors who obtained their first degree outside the United States, and then came to the United States and achieved university rank. He found that of all the nations in the world, the Greeks have the second highest per capita presence in American universities after the Israelis. And as John Ioannidis, the famous John Ioannidis of Stanford University says, that only includes the Greeks who came from Greece. It does not include all the other Greeks like me, who are part of the Greek diaspora, or who were born in other countries, who also are, academics in America. And does not include the scientists, those in science and health science in particular, where you have a high percentage of Greeks. If we include that ratio, it's even greater, just to show the strength of Greek learning. So Greece has to improve its institutions, increase its population. It has to become more prosperous. It has to open itself up to more foreign investment, to more liberal markets. All the socialist misgivings and workers' rights. My father was a worker. My mother was a worker. I respect those rights. But first comes the ergodotis, and above him comes the patrida. Θεός, Χριστός, πατρίδα, εργοδότης και μετά υπόλοιποι. So there has to be a clear hierarchy of who we are, what we believe in, and what is good for us, okay? Now, my final thoughts are the following. What are the prospects of Greece moving forward? And here I will engage you with a little radical idea. My view is that Turkey is heading for disaster, in fact, for catastrophe. The internal dissensions within Turkey between the Kemalists and the Muslims, between Turkey and its Kurdish minority, which is basically a quarter of its population, between the moderate Muslims and the radical Muslims. And Turkey's foreign relations, picking fights with all its neighbors, that is setting Turkey in a track for disaster, for catastrophe. I expect that Turkey is going to get into a war. Erdogan is acting very much like Adolf Hitler in the 30s. Just as Adolf Hitler wanted to throw away the Treaty of Versailles that set Germany's borders after the First World War, Erdogan wants to throw away the Treaty of Lausanne that set modern Turkey's borders. In doing so, he threatens the stability and security of the whole region. The Arabs don't want it because they were also under Turkish rule, just like the Greeks were. So Greeks and Arabs, we share an anti-Turkish emotion. Then the Russians don't want what Turkey's doing, because Erdogan's brand of pan-Turkism, of uniting all the Turks into Asia, the Turkic republics, Turkestan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, and you name it, that threatens Russia. And Russia has a long history, 17 wars with Turkey, a long history. And I suspect that at some point it's going to come to that. And when it comes to that, Turkey is most likely to be the loser. So what we have to prepare ourselves for is to pick up the pieces of a Turkey that will be destroyed. Because the West, after, if Turkey's power diminishes, the West will want to have a counterweight to Russia. So guess who they're going to ask for help? It's already happening. Greek bases, more Greek bases in America, more strategic alliances between America and Greece, France and Greece. It's already happening. They will rely on Greece to protect the Dardanelles, the Bosporus, to make sure that Russia doesn't pick up all the pieces. So Greece will be asked to take over Constantinople and the western part of Turkey. Personally, I don't advocate to go on war with anyone. I don't advocate to attack Turkey. There are too many. It's too costly. It's not practical. Nor from a Christian standpoint do I believe that, we should use force. But if it happens, we have to be prepared to pick up the pieces. And what does that mean? It means the Greece is we have in our mind, and it's too bad the slide is not there, the last slide of my presentation. The Greece we have in mind is the Greece, the little Greece on the European side. We keep leaving Cyprus out of it because Cyprus is part of Greece. They're Hellenists too. We have to understand that Greece is much bigger than that little piece of land. It includes the sea, the exclusive economic zone. It includes all the Greek areas, the cities, the towns in Anatolia. It also, that were for thousands of years part of the Greek nation. So we need to come up with a new vision and be prepared, plan B, so to speak. So in the event that this happens, are we prepared to take on 10, 20 million people from Turkey? They're not going to have the same religion as us. We'll become more of a multi-ethnic country, not only Christian, but also have lots of Muslims. Are we prepared for that? There are some important issues that we have to think and be prepared, not to react at the last minute, but we have to just consider them. Because in the end, I believe that a lot of the Turks are Christians who are waiting to convert officially back to Christianity. A lot of these,
I'm gonna have to interrupt you here.
I'm finishing. Yeah, I know.
No.
So all I want to say is that we have to be prepared to bring them into our fold. So with that radical thought, I end my presentation. I'd like to thank the Congress, thank the participants for being patient with me and all of you, and Zito y Elada.
Thank you, Professor Mazzurini, and I would love to open the floor for questions and comments. There's a lot of food for thought. I'd like to give the floor now to our president, Theodore. If you can open your camera and your microphone, Theodore.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me? See me?
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our two esteemed guests, Senator Husako and Professor Mazzurini, for their very valuable and true to today's realities presentations. Their passion and knowledge for Hellenism, its definition, its value, and its promotion oozed throughout their presentations. I'd like to thank them, and at some point, since we're celebrating the next year, the 200th anniversary of the revolution, at some point we could have them back for more of their thoughts. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the attendees of this afternoon's presentations. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope there was a lot of fruitful and interesting concepts and ideas for the future of Hellenism that we will all benefit from. I'd like to thank also the delegates that participated. Over 90 delegates participated in yesterday's annual General Assembly, and it had a specific, important, historic tone as we went through and voted in amendments to solidify our new Constitution of 2016. From now on, all our endeavors, all our future proceedings, elections, etc., are going to be based on the 2016 new Constitution. I'd like to thank also all the members of the National Council of the Canadian Hellenic Congress for their ever-presence, their ideas, their support, and their participation in all our decisions. And I'd like to thank the executive, Angie Zouvelakos, who was chair of this year's convention, Pelagia Damidis, who helps us out with everything of the Congress, our executive vice president, George Manos, and our general secretary, Costa Papas. This ends our 38th annual convention for this year. À l'année prochaine, as we say here in Quebec, the year 2021, as we celebrate the 200th anniversary of the Hellenic Revolution. Zito Kanadas και ζήτω η ελεύθερη Ελλάδα μας. Να είμαστε όλοι καλά, be safe, and to next year. Thank you, Angie.
I think I had my mic off the whole time. I thanked everybody for coming and nobody heard me. Thank you everyone for coming. Have a good weekend, rest of the weekend, be safe, and we'll see you next time in Montreal when we have our convention. Bye-bye, everyone.